Welcome to Work the Left Side. I'm hyper hyped to announce Mr. Graham Pearce is back in the house again. Obviously, I've spoken to Mr. Pearce before, had a genuine pleasure, and this time he is back to talk about Masters of the Universe. Mr. Pearce, are you good?
I am very good. I'm thrilled to be back on again, talking about something that I love even more than wrestling, which is He-Man, Masters of the Universe, 80s toys, 80s movies. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, dude. That's the. I think I've got a feeling as well. I can, we'll be talking. I can just sit back and let you go, and I'll just be sat there with a big smile on my face, and I'll just be like, yes, member berries everywhere. But that's the thing. Obviously, that's the big thing about this is it's a huge nostalgia trip. All this kind of sort of stuff. It depends on people's ages, what they kind of grew up with, what they like. I'm of that age where I was just a wee little kid when He-Man first came out. I had the toys the first time around. I remember them. I remember the cartoon. I don't think I was old enough to watch the film when it first came out, so I remember having to watch it on VHS when I was old enough, or when my parents thought like, God, we'll let them watch it, kind of thing. And it's just, yeah. I mean, we'll get to the new film, eventually. But yeah, I want to go old school at the minute. I just want to talk about, we'll talk about the Dolph Lundgren film because that was. It's I rewatched it again recently, and obviously it's fueled by nostalgia. I still love it. I still think it's great. But one of my other mates watched it for the first time recently, and he just looked at me and he was like, "Dude," I was like, "If the nostalgia's not, if the nostalgia's not there, yeah, it's a hard sell."
I think it's like that with any movie you grow up with, isn't it? If you show it to someone else in their 30s, in their 40s, and they don't have that context for spending it, of watching it repeatedly as a kid, yeah, it goes straight over the head. I'm sort of guilty that I never saw Ferris Bueller until I was about 25, and the same with Lost Boys. So things like that. There's several movies that I never really watched as a kid, and I didn't really click with them then as an adult.
Yeah.
Whereas Masters of the Universe, I'm of a similar age to you. I think I'm a little bit older than you, but I can remember the day the cartoon started on ITV. Because I remember I was probably like 5 or 6 years old, sat on the carpet watching ITV, and the intro sequence came on, and I remember my mum in the background saying, "Why is he shouting all of the time?" And I'm just sat there like, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen. And it's one of those things, no matter how many times you watch it, you just instantly thrown back to seeing that intro. And it's one of those brilliant intros that sums up everything in 30 seconds. You know the premise. I mean, they don't have to do often a lot of the old 80s cartoons, they would have a theme tune where the lyrics explain the situation, like, pole position and things like that. But no, it was just, it's just one of those amazing cartoons that straight to the point. He-Man appears, introduces himself, explains what the situation is, straight away reveals his secret powers, and straight away you're blown into it, and it was awesome. But then we've also got to remember that the cartoon wasn't the first thing. There were toys that came out a year before. And if you want to talk about the toys, you've kind of got to go back to Star Wars, because it all begins with Star Wars when Mattel, the company that ultimately created He-Man, they passed on making Star Wars toys, and it haunted them for like the next 5 years because they said, no thanks, that'll never take off. No one wants to buy toys for a sci-fi movie called Star Wars. Obviously, Kenner got the license and then made billions. But Mattel, they've spent the next 5 years thinking, how on earth did we miss this? So they did figures. They then basically took the figures for any movie they could get. So they did things like, I think they did Battlestar Galactica, the TV show. Then I think they did Clash of the Titans.
Yes, yes, they did. Yep.
There's a couple of others, the things they did, but
Well, Conan was the key one. Conan was the one that they kind of went into and then realized it was an R-rated film, and there's like, how that we can't sell toys for an R-rated film, but they kind of had a lot of the designs and a lot of the artwork for Conan, and then one of the other guys was working on something else as well, and it all kind of you know
it was like
amalgamated together.
it was a perfect blend because there's a TV show on Netflix called The Toys That Made Us.
Yeah.
If ever you've watched it, it's bloody amazing. I love watching it. But on that, they talk about how Mattel were scratching their heads, going, right, we missed this Star Wars thing. We need to come up with our own ideas because the IPs we're buying in, they're costing us a fortune. They're for movies that come out and then 6 weeks later they're gone. And yet we've got millions of pounds of toys on shelves that aren't selling. So that's when they said, we need to come up with our own things. So they went to the researchers and said, what do 6-year-old boys like to, what sort of characters, what scenarios do they like for playing with? And that's when they started saying, well, they like police officers, they like soldiers, they like going on adventures. And one of the key words that came back to them from the marketing was that kids want to have power. They literally said, I have the power, when they were playing with these toys, because they were enacting scenarios where they weren't being told off by their parents. And that was the key word. So then when they started pitching these ideas saying, well, kids, they like soldiers, they like space robots, they like barbarians, that's when the guys at Mattel said, right, let's take some of our old figures, we'll bulk them up, and we'll pitch them as possible ideas for us to go with. So there's a famous photo out there of a Boba Fett character. There's a character with a
bullet head.
Yeah, bullet head.
Bullet head.
And then
Yeah.
tank head. And then you've got this character that was called He-Man, which was bulked up, grizzled face, muscles everywhere, massive axe. And that was the one that they decided they wanted to go with because it was different. And it was a safer version than the Conan thing that they wanted to do, but that was R-rated, so they could never go down that route. And as you say, one of the designers, he was a massive fan of Frank Frazetta and all the other sort of 70s barbarians and Valkyries artwork. And he had his own character. I think was it Torak or Torog or something?
Torog, I want to say.
Torog. And he then basically pitched that, and they added on the He-Man name, and it kind of went from there. I don't know if you can see, I've got a few of the He-Man figures I'm making. Well, these are the modern.
Yes.
These are the Origins ones, so they've got loads of articulation. You can pull the heads off. So you can take the head off, swap them around if you want. But the last year or so, I've been buying loads of these off Vinted.
Nice.
So, but I'm setting myself, I'm only going for something that is a repaint of this mold, because otherwise I would be here forever. So I've got He-Man, I've got Faker, I've got Prince Adam, I've got the Anti-Eternia He-Man, and I've got the one with the battle damaged chest based on the old Hot Wheels toys. So I'm gonna leave these here for when my missus gets home. See how long till she notices. Because I tried having a couple of He-Man things on the shelves over the last few months, but she started getting a bit fed up with them and hiding them away. So yeah, I got them out for tonight, but they'll be gone in no time. I don't know if
you can see over my shoulder above SpongeBob. SpongeBob, I've got the big masses of the He-Man Pop Funk.
All right, yeah, cool. Oh yeah, excellent.
Next to Galactus.
Got to be done.
10 quid for your heads up. 10 quid. B&M. Huge He-Man Pop Funk is literally it's about that big.
Awesome.
So I was like, I love that, thank you. But yeah, that's the thing. That is the crazy origin of, because obviously, like you sort of said, back in the day, toys were made as part of the merchandise for something that was already out, like films or cartoons or things like that. He-Man, as far as I'm aware, was really the first one where the toys came out and then they put individual comic books in with each character to try and tell the story or try and build up the mythology, the universe, but then they kind of realized we can't just keep putting like just cost production wise, it was crazy. It wasn't doable kind of thing. So like, right, how do we tell the story? How do we create these characters for the kids, to build upon, give them some information that they can use when they're playing with these toys. And yeah, that's when the cartoon kind of came about. So
But it was
basically the
also
cartoon,
carry on.
I would say the cartoon was basically like a 20-minute long advert for the toys.
Yeah, and they could only do that because when Ronald Reagan became president, he got rid of some of the advertising laws. So for like 20 odd years, you weren't allowed to have any cartoon advertising. You weren't allowed to have any advertising for toys that was part of children's TV. Yeah. But then when Reagan came in, they relaxed those laws. And then as a result, you end up with a massive explosion of amazing 80s toys like G.I. Joe, Transformers, Thundercat, Mask. Centurions, all of those things that are cartoons, comics, and toys at the same time that all cross advertised each other, and they were all amazing.
Yeah, Centurions. Very few people remember that or will acknowledge it or even know what it is. And for years, I thought I'd made it up until a few other people sort of said, "Oh yeah, I'm the Centurions." I was like, "Oh yes." That wasn't me. It wasn't my childhood. Those again, we'll sidebar back in a second. But the Centurions toys were like the best toys I'd ever seen in my life. They were like 3 times bigger than like the He-Man figures. They were huge, and they had on the snap because you had the air one, the land one, and the sea one, and obviously it just everything snapped on, and it was just like, oh my god, those toys were amazing.
But they were really expensive to make, which meant back in a time when if you could get a He-Man figure for £5, or if it was like 15 quid for a Centurion, you're less likely to get a Centurion because you only get one of them, and then you've got to buy others for them to find. Whereas the He-Man figures were a lot cheaper and smaller, and you can build up a proper collection very quickly.
Hence why I never had a Centurions toy, and then for years I thought I'd made it up. But yeah, that was the thing. But yeah, obviously that was He-Man. That was the origins. That was kind of like how it all came about. And then obviously on the back of the success of the toys and the cartoon and everything like that, they basically got the go ahead to make this film. Obviously Dolph Lundgren, a very young Courtney Cox. But the issues they had were obviously it was an action film, but based on a kid's toys. So, he couldn't be going around stabbing people with his sword or, slicing and dicing people with his sword. You had to kind of be very, I presume that's where, he ended up half the film just shooting a space gun because they had to cut back on the sword violence.
Yeah, and that's why all the bad guys were robots, because you couldn't have blood, you couldn't have a hero killing people, which is a shame that Mattel had those sort of stipulations in the contract, because if you think about it, the film, it took them a few years to actually get the film going, and then so it doesn't come out till like 5 years after the toys.
Yeah.
So you can argue that the kids that were originally playing with He-Man, they've grown up, and they could probably handle a PG movie by this point with some, not obviously an R-rated movie, but they could probably handle some more action. But no, Mattel wanted to stick to their guns and make it incredibly kid-friendly, which then brings out, means you've got a lot of complications that you then have to get around, which, that happens all the time with movies. There's always creative ways to get around that. It didn't stop Ninja Turtles because they made all the robots. They made the plan in Ninja Turtles. They turned them into robots because, you can't have ninjas slicing real people with swords. So they turned them into robots. And it was one of the most successful cartoons of the late 80s. So there's always ways around it. And often those stipulations and restrictions, if you're creative, you find a way of getting around it and making things even better.
Yeah. Oh, there's always a loophole. But I mean, that's the thing. Again, I didn't really make that connection. The first film I kind of thought of that did this was, episode 1. For some reason, it's just the first one that comes to mind. Is obviously because episode 1, has Jedi's in it or more Jedi's, there's going to be a lot more lightsaber fights. Obviously, you
Yeah,
can't have lightsaber fights against stormtroopers. That's where the clone army. That's where the droid army came into play. They had to
yeah,
have like exactly the same mindset. Right, we've got people with swords. They're going to be slicing and dicing. We can't do it to humans. Right? Yeah, robots. Lots and lots of robots. Just smash
it's,
them all up.
yeah. And it was the same if you've watched Samurai Jack. That is something else where they haven't got Jack slicing real people, so he's always slicing robots. So you get oil splurting everywhere instead of blood. Similar kind of thing. But then you get other movies where you can't have real blood being shown, so they have coloured blood to get around censor laws, like with Star Wars. When who was it? When the Walrus Man is picking on Luke in the cantina and gets his arm sliced off. They have coloured blood, and they do the same in Flash Gordon as well. It's always coloured blood to try and make things less shocking.
Yeah, if it's blue or if it's green, it's just like it just looks like slime. There we go, it's some gooey slime. Yeah,
we can get away with it.
It's less offensive. Yeah, it's less offensive. But that's the thing, obviously. Like again, I don't know if you got around to watching it, but there is an awesome documentary on Prime that I discovered last week, which is basically like the origins of Masters of the Universe. It goes into the toys, it goes into the cartoon, it goes into the film, and it talks. And this is where anytime I do these episodes, I just forget names. I don't know what it is, whether it's on camera because I'm looking I can see myself or the pressure. I forget everybody. Well, I forget most people's names. I'm not going to forget Dolph Lundgren's name, but the guy who played Skeletor's Frank Langella or something.
Langella.
Yes, that's it. I kind of got it right. It's close. But there's an amazing interview with him on there, and he's kind of like saying, the process that he went through to play Skeletor, and kind of like, to get the face right, but to be able to still see his eyes, to be able to the mouth move enough so he could get that emotion over, but the way that he wanted to play it. And I watched it again recently, and that dude has got some amazing lines. I forgot how good Skeletor's dialogue is in that film. It's probably the best thing.
That himself, didn't he?
Yeah.
A lot of that was just he really committed to the role. He wasn't sort of doing it for a paycheck. He was doing it because his kids loved it, and he wanted to be in a film that his kids would love. And he committed to it, and he's absolutely bloody amazing in that. He's a completely different version to the Alan Oppenheimer version that you get from the cartoon, who's always cackling and calling everybody a boob. Skeletor in the movie, he's really scary, and he's so good in that role. I watched the documentary the other night, but for the last sort of 6 weeks since we sort of were discussing about doing this, I have watched so many behind the scenes documentaries. I've watched the movie so many times, even just watching little clips here and there. And it's one of those movies that no matter how many times I watch it, it feels like I'm watching it for the first time, because there's always stuff that I notice for the first time. And it's one of those movies that visually just looks stunning. It does not look like, it's made by Canon Films, who were sort of notorious for doing low budget movies in the 80s, doing lots of cheap movies very quickly. And their business model was that if one of those movies is a hit, that funds them to go off and do a load more cheap movies. This was like a change in their business model, where they were trying to get a bit more prestige. So they went for the He-Man license, they went for the Superman license, they got the Spider-Man license as well, which when Canon ended up, that caused loads of problems, which meant we didn't get a Spider-Man movie for another sort of 15 years. But no, they spent more money on this than they had in any of their other movies. But they even got Mattel to pop up half of it. I think there was like a $20 million budget, and Canon got Mattel to stump up half of it. But I think there were some shady goings on with Canon, where they asked Mattel to cough up their half first. And then as time went on, and there was budgetary issues anyway. They had a director that had never directed a movie before. So do you know, I don't know if it was in the documentary, do you know how Gary Goddard got picked to do this role?
No.
Prior to becoming a director, he was an Imagineer for Disneyland. So he's one of the guys that designed the ride and the whole sort of experience of going on a ride. He was one of the guys that worked on that experience. But then a couple of years later, he ended up working for Universal, and they did a Conan the Barbarian live stage show. He produced and directed that. So that was basically his audition to then do a He-Man movie. So you're picking someone who's already done a pretty successful property of a big muscly guy with a sword. You just haven't directed a movie, but they brought him in to direct the movie. And I think there were some issues with Canon kind of being very sketchy with some of the finances and making Mattel pop up first half first. And then I think towards the end of the shoot, when money was running out, Canon kind of held back and didn't cough up any more money, knowing that Mattel, they'd already invested so much into it that they would invest the rest. So I think there were a few dodgy things going on. And you can see there's elements of the movie. You can see why they've done it the way they've done it, because they had no money. So that anytime you've got no money in a fantasy movie, you have to set it on Earth. Exactly why Doctor Who spent most of the 70s in a quarry in Devon. They had no money. It's the oldest trick in the book. They did spend about £500,000 on the set for the Castle Grayskull scene at the beginning and at the end. But without Gary Goddard, they wouldn't have even had that stuff. It would have just started on Earth, which I would say it would be a much worse movie if they did that, because that setting they've got is brilliant, because it's Skeletor's introduction. It's where you have the main fight at the end, and admittedly there's issues with that fight because there was scheduling issues where the money was cut and they
put it short, didn't they?
If today's your last day, they wanted to end the movie without a proper fight scene, but Gary Goddard had to fight for that, and I think he was given half a day, so that's why they had the bit towards when Skeletor and He-Man are fighting. They're in the dark because there was no one left on set to even put any lights up. They basically had like a cameraman, a couple of actors, and they filmed that. And even then, they still didn't have an ending. They had to go back 3 months later to film the very final bit where Skeletor gets thrown down the pit. So it's one of those movies. The lack of money is all over. Have you noticed there's actually a shot in there that they use 3 times? The same shot appears in that movie 3 times.
Oh, I can remember noticing it, but for the life of me, I'm drawing. Like I said, when I do these things, my mind just goes blank. But I do remember spotting something and being like, "Huh?" But I can't, for the life of me, remember what it was now.
Towards the start of the movie, there's a scene, like a wide establishing shot of like the landscape of Eternia, of like this desert background, and you've got this tiny little picture, a matte painting of Castle Grayskull in the distance, and you've got a couple of robot guys who walk past the camera. That scene is then used again about 5 minutes later, but they flipped it the other way to make you think it's different. So now they're walking the other way. And then I think another 5 minutes after, they show the same footage again. But the funny thing is, one of the extras trips over as he's walking down those rocks. And they use that same bit 3 times just to save money.
That was the thing as well. Like you said there about the painting. Obviously, didn't realize until I watched the documentary. But yeah, like the long shots that you sort of see. Just paintings. Done in such a way that.
And they went to the famous rock formation, Vasquez Rocks, where they filmed loads of Star Trek movies in the Star Trek shows in the 60s. It's that rock formation that is in loads of things because it's like half a mile within the 30-mile zone for sort of the Hollywood Union rules. So if filming is outside of that 30-mile limit, they have to pay all the cast and crew extra to go there. But if it's within that 30-mile limit, they have to basically turn up on their own money. So that's why so many production companies go there, because they don't have to pay any extra for people to use it. So it's that same rock formation that's been used in every TV show. Anytime they need to have like an alien planet, it's the exact same rock. And that's where they film the opening battle with He-Man and Gwildor being rescued out of the net. And the clunky fight scene with He-Man trying to fight these robots. Dolph's with his massive sword that he can barely hold up. Yeah. What a way to start a movie.
It was fair. It hits the ground running, and God love it. Wildo is basically Orca for the film, right?
Yeah. If you don't have the special effects to do a floating magician, then you have to find another way to have the comedy character that explains the plot and gets into clumsy situations. If you don't have a battle cat, because you can't paint a tiger green, you've got to find. Obviously, they didn't replace that character. I mean, they could have borrowed one of those ones off Siegfried and Roy before it ended up mauling one of them. But yeah, never work with children or animals. And speaking of children, do you know the story of Pig Boy?
No.
I never knew what Pig Boy was, but every time when I got to the end of this movie and went through the credits, the final credit, there is a character called Pig Boy. And I was like, what the hell is Pig Boy? And it's only in the last few years I've found out what Pig Boy is. Basically, when Mattel were wanting to advertise that they were making this movie, they held a contest. And it was basically for anyone who was buying He-Man toys, you could fill in a coupon and you get to appear in the He-Man movie. But apparently, Mattel didn't tell Canon about this until the last couple of days of filming. And it was a case, they filmed all the stuff on Earth, and it's like, right, okay, yeah, we've got the kid here from the contest. And they're like, what kid? He's in the film. We've got to find a part for him in the film. And they're like, well, we can't have a kid running around Castle Grayskull. What the hell are we going to do? So they had to really quickly come up with a character for this kid. They put a pig mark on his face. They gave him a little suit of armor. And there's a point towards the end of the movie when, I think it's when they all come back from Earth, Skeletor walks back up to his throne, and there's a kid holding Skeletor's staff. The kid hands Skeletor the staff and turns to watch Skeletor walk past. That is Pig Boy. And that poor little kid, he went telling all his mates, I'm in the He-Man movie, but no one could see his face. So for years, he just denied all knowledge because he was just like so humiliated. But also, they didn't test his skin when they applied the glue to his face. So later that day, when they peeled the mask off, they basically ripped part of his skin off. And his skin had a nervous reaction to the glue anyway, because they didn't have time to do any testing. So poor little Pig Boy doesn't appear on camera in his face, and then gets his skin ripped off because of the makeup. But he did a shitload of He-Man toys that he supposedly put in a suitcase, and it was only years later that he realised that Pig Boy started to become a bit of a meme online, that he came forward and went, yeah, I'm Pig Boy, and I've got this suitcase of all this cool stuff. So we had like Gwildor action figures on card that had never been touched. So we had loads of rare figures because the bounty hunters in that movie, a lot of them were brand new characters.
Yeah.
And they're incredibly hard to get hold of these days. So this kid had a load of those in a suitcase. Possibly so his parents didn't sue them for ripping the skin off his face.
Take the toys, take all the toys. Take Blade, take Frogman, take
whatever you want. Take cards.
That is amazing. Bless Frog Boy. Pig Boy though. Oh, justice for Pig Boy.
Pig Boy's dad, or Pig Boy and Pig Boy's dad are actually in the new movie.
No.
So there's obviously it's the same character, it's a different actor, but there's a scene where Skeletor is asleep in Snake Mountain under his blanket. The person that comes in to tend to him, that is the new version of Pig Boy. So it's like a classic Easter egg.
That's it. If you know, you know, dude. That's amazing. I didn't even know that. That's quality. But that's the thing, right? Well, we'll jump forward to the obviously the new film because that's the thing. I mean, I'm going to watch it again, and there's probably I went to the cinema to watch it. Literally probably the weekend it came out, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I know I missed so much. Hence, like what you've just said, you've just given that thing. If I probably knew more about the original film, I love the original film, but I've never gone too deep into it until recently, kind of thing.
Far too
So
deep.
yeah, down that rabbit hole. But knowing all this kind of stuff now, I know on my second viewing, there'll be things that I pick up on. I'll be like, oh, you're going to tell me about them during this conversation anyway, probably. So I'll be like, that's what Graham was all about. Okay, yeah, I see that. I see that. But yeah, I mean, obviously the new film came out. You know, remember berries for everybody. Again, you know, we said this the magic word nostalgia. For the most part, everybody that I know thoroughly enjoyed it. I know one person who didn't, but for the most
Really?
part, yeah, dude.
What?
Basically said it's probably the worst film he's ever seen. There's not liking it, and then he generally hated it with a
Oh, right.
passion.
Okay.
Absolutely hated it with a passion. But everybody else that I know seems to have thoroughly enjoyed it, and yeah, just you know, left with a smile on the face, and it ticked all the boxes. You know, I went um, to be entertained. I went to have my memory glands tickled and
Yeah.
caressed and stuff like that, and it did everything I wanted it to do. You know, it was the film I wanted. You know, back in the day, yeah, everything was there. The characters were there. The settings was there. Um, but I'll let you sort of obviously. I know you've seen it, kind of thing. I've said somebody did like it. I know you loved it. So tell me why. You know
I
what?
loved it. I remember hearing some like reactions to like, test screenings last Christmas that kind of got online, and people, a lot of the sort of the internet journalists were saying there's a really good buzz about this movie. Um, and I remember at the time hearing this, and as soon as I heard this, I was straight messaging Joey Hayes because for anyone who doesn't know, Joey Hayes is the biggest fan of He-Man that I know. And I didn't know about this him. I didn't know this about him for several years. And I've worked with Joey on so many shows, and he'd kept quiet about this. I've never really talked about my obsession with toys when I was at wrestling shows either. But there was a show where I was trying to find him because I needed to find out something about his match, and I was just like, "Has anyone seen Joey Hayes?" And one of the merch girls, Kelly, she said, "Oh no, Shana, one of our merch girls." She went, "I think he's gone to TK Maxx to look for He-Man toys." I was like, "What? He's got what?" And he went, "Yeah, he always goes to TK Maxx to look for He-Man toys." And I was like, "That's what I do. That's what I do when I'm not trying to get everyone's intros for the show. I'm normally down the road at TK Maxx." So as soon as he came back, I collared him. I was like, "Joey, is there something you want to tell me? Are you a closet
Yeah,
He-Man fan?" We just constantly message each other about He-Man closet. I messaged him today because I saw someone on Facebook selling a load of cheap He-Man figures. I've snagged the ones I want, and I messaged Joey to say, "Is there anything you need?" Um, but no, since last December, me and Joe have been messaging each other constantly, talking about how excited we are for this movie, trying to rein in our expectations because it's far too easy to blow things out of proportion, and then an okay movie is still a disappointment. But I remember when that first trailer came out, it might have been back in February or March, and me and Joey were like messaging each day, sending each other messages saying, "It's got to be coming any day now. Any day now. It's coming. It can't be very long." And then when it came out, we were both blown away by it. Um, and all the way through the marketing, we were getting more and more excited. And I wanted to go on the opening night. I couldn't because I needed to stay home and look after the kids because the wife was out at a pub quiz. My kids being boring 12-year-olds that aren't impressed by anything, they were like, "Oh, we don't really want to go tonight." So me and my wife went. I think we went on the Friday night. Kids stayed home, and I'm probably going to arrested by the police for abandoning 12-year-olds at home for a couple of hours. But me and the missus went. I absolutely loved it. I was just grinning from ear to ear for 2.5 hours. Um, I have this thing that, there's this thing my friend calls it cheapies. So when you're watching a movie and you feel the hairs stand up on the back of your neck, or you get that rush where your eyes start welling up, we call it cheapies. I had that constantly through that movie. I was like in a constant state of cheapies. It was amazing. And the Brian May guitar music, when they kind of released that track a couple of weeks before, I just sat down and I was like, oh my God, this is everything I wanted. This has got that Queen, Flash Gordon vibe. It's got Brian May doing the guitar. It was just incredible. I loved everything about that movie. There were a few things in there that I thought were a bit odd, but nothing that really bothered me. The thing that I loved is how they embraced a lot of the memes as well. So they had the Four Non-Blondes music in there at some point. The memes around when they were all leaning back laughing, doing the ha, 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 stuff like that, which I wasn't even expecting. That is the thing that when I left that cinema, I was just thinking about that final 2 or 3 minutes. I don't want to spoil what happened, but the costumes, the setup, the running away, the man at arms saying, "Why are you doing that?" Just that way, how it ended was just perfect. The fact that the names of all the characters are how Adam remembered them, and he'd kind of given them all these names when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And little things like that. No, well, yeah, Fisto. I just love that, how they tried to make sense of the stupid names. Yeah, I loved everything about the movie, and I love that he didn't become He-Man at the very, very end. He did it halfway in the movie, so we had plenty of him as He-Man. Yeah, and the fact that when he's Adam on Earth, he's running around in a pink shirt in the same He-Man look. Yeah. I need to go back and see the movie again because I loved it. And the Skeletor in HR. I don't want to say too much about that, but the Skeletor HR gear towards the end, and Skeletor in the gym gear in the hallucinations. There's people online that are already doing custom action figures of Jim Bro Skeletor, and I am down for that.
A whole line. You could just have a shelf full of different Skeletors. That'd be amazing. But that was the thing as well, because that was one of my concerns. Because I might be wrong here, but I'm sure somebody kind of tried to reassure me when this was like when the first trailer came out, and I was like, oh, mate, yeah, and there's like it's done by the same guy who did Bumblebee. And Bumblebee is like my favorite Transformers film. I think that nailed the nostalgia. It didn't try to be something else. It knew what its source material was. It acknowledged the source material. It paid homage to it, and it showed it some love. And I was like, right, if the guy can do that with Bumblebee, he can do it with He-Man. Awesome, right? My mind's put at ease now. I'm excited now to go watch it, kind of thing. And it did that, like you sort of said, with the pink shirt, just the way, like, say, the ridiculous names. We know they're ridiculous names, but if that's what they're called because a kid remembered it, that makes all the sense to me. That's kind of like, okay, that's a very cool, clever explanation. We want to call a guy Ram Man for that, or Fisto. Yeah, that makes sense to me. There we go. What was the flying dude's name that wasn't in the film? Because he was the one missing part of it for me. I was like, man, it would have been awesome to have. I can't remember the life of me his name in the cartoon. Strastos, that's it. Yes.
But you do mention him at in the end credits. No, it's in the end credit when they're doing the ha 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 ha, and Roboto gets the alert message come through where they're saying, "Oh, the I think they're called the Avarians are sent out a distress signal." That is the Stratos race of people, the Birdmen.
Right. Second film then. There we go. We'll save it for a sequel, I guess.
Yeah, there's so many others they can put in the second movie. Because there's like Merman, who apparently he's in the background in a scene. There is a Merman character. Originally, that character was called Seaman, or
yeah, he was.
They changed that one. I mean, you've got Fisher, haven't you, and Ram Man? I mean, is Seaman any worse? Probably not.
yes, it is. Yes, Seaman is worse.
But yeah, there's so many more characters they can throw in to a second movie, including a character that is in the end credits that I don't know if we need to spoil a spin-off character that does appear.
I don't know. That was huge. That was a massive thing. No, I don't think we should. Anybody who hasn't seen it, make sure you hang around. Obviously, watch the credits. Yeah, if that happens, I'm going to be psyched for that. I'm going to be because that's a franchise within itself as well. It doesn't even have to be, it could be a totally spin-off film. That could be its own franchise alongside this one as well. So they've got options. We'll see what they do with that. But yeah,
I would love to see like a standalone, bit like they're doing with Supergirl. Have that character come in, have the sort of the connection with the wider universe, but they go off and have their adventure. And then maybe when there's a combined threat of multiple villains, then you get your own sort of Avengers team up.
That'd be awesome. Yeah, I'd be happy for that. I'll take that. Casting wise as well, I'll get to Skeletor in a minute because that was my main concern. But huge shout out to Mr. Idris Elba as Duncan. Dude was awesome. Elba's boss anyway. This is the guy who's just been absolutely smashing it for years. I thought it was amazing. I loved him as Man at Arms. That whole sort of like blaming himself, living for 15 years as a drunk because he just the consequences of the opening sequence to then get his redemption, his journey back. That was just as important as Adam's journey for me.
Definitely, yeah, and it was good that they gave someone like Idris something to sink his teeth into. I mean, it wasn't a massive. You're not going to get much depth in a kids' movie, but he had a decent character arc, and then I like the relationship at the end where he was like talking to Adam, said, "So, how are you getting on with the feelings?" And it kind of reminded me of my dad, because my dad, if you want to talk about feelings, he's not the most touchy-feely sort of parent. He sort of stiff up a lip and all that, which is like a lot of sort of older generation are. But it just reminded me of my dad, and that just made me laugh even more, because anytime I see a guy trying to embrace his feelings, I love that. And it just did it so well, because he's just a badass, isn't he? Whatever movie he's in, he is a badass, solid.
But him being in it was one of the because my only not beef with it, I think an obvious thing to point out, which if people wanted to look at it in a negative or look at it in a gnarly way, and again though, because we're fans of the cartoons, we know this came first. But visually you're looking at it and it is very Thor Ragnarok in places. Eternia looks like Asgard in places. You've got Idris Elba, who was obviously Heimdall in the Thor films kind of thing. And he had a lot more to do in this film than he did in the first two Thor films. He didn't just stick a sword in and twist it. That was pretty much his role for the first two Thor films. But that is the only sort of thing I think people, if they wanted to be gnarly about it, they could just be like, it kind of feels like a Thor ripoff. It was like, no, this came first. This. I know Thor was in the comics from the 70s, but visually on TV, on screen, Eternia was before Asgard in our eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there was some really stupid criticism about the race swapping, which I don't even want to talk about that because that's just stupid. Anyone has an issue with the movie because of that. But am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, man, go for it.
Fuck off.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's exactly the same character, regardless. It's the same character, same origin, same characteristics. It doesn't mean squat. So it's not an issue. Shut up about it. Get out. Stop watching this episode if you're watching this. Then just do one. But yeah, to me that was the only kind of, like I sort of said, just if people want to make comparisons, or if they want to make comparisons in a shitty way, that would be, the kind of the easy bait.
Yeah, but then I mean, movies borrow from other movies all the time, don't they?
Yeah.
You've got so many actors that are always playing a similar type role. That's kind of how a lot of people make their careers, isn't it? They
Yeah.
end up getting typecast, and that's what they do for most of their career. But no, the I wasn't overly keen on the voice for Cringer. I want because it just sounded like a kid. I wanted it to be a bit more, like cowardly
Yeah.
and um.
As we
But
know from the cartoons, yeah, that the cartoon Cringer is perfect. Yeah, he wasn't really a coward when he was Cringer, was he? He was just kind of like, yeah, this is what it is. It's all right.
he's
It's
just
cool.
clumsy, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just such a fun movie, and I can't wait to watch it again. I mean, the thing that's kind of hit home for me is that um, the 80s properties that we grew up loving, I don't think there's much of an audience mainstream these days for those properties because it hasn't done very well at the cinema, which is a real shame. Even
No.
though the people that have gone to see it have absolutely loved it, it's not making a great deal of money. But the good thing is, the person who owns Amazon, he's got a few quid.
Yeah.
So I don't think he's going to be too worried about He-Man not making a fortune. He knows there's an audience there. I wouldn't be at all surprised if we get, I think once it goes onto Amazon Prime, there'll be a big increase in viewings, ratings, whatever. And there's already talk about them doing a sequel. So I would be very happy to see that. But yeah, it's a bit sad that I'm now thinking that maybe I'm not as cool as what I thought I was because the the kids didn't want to go and see He-Man. Although when I did go, there were quite a lot of youngsters in the cinema. There were a lot of middle-aged men dragging their wives and significant others, like I did. There were a lot of middle-aged men that didn't have wives or girlfriends to drag, and they were just there with their mates. And the thing that I remember is at the end of the movie, we stayed for all three of the end credits. The lights came up. I turned to my missus, and she looked at me and went, "That was a big pile of shit." And I just looked at her and was like, "Was absolutely bloody amazing, and I loved every second of it." But me and my wife, we've got completely different taste in movies. But she came with me because she knew that if she didn't, I would come home and I would then spend the next 3 weeks telling her everything that happened. But she took the hit by coming with me for an hour and a half, sitting through it, and then she never has to listen to me talk about it ever again.
That's genius. God bless her. She, yeah, genius, clever. Right, I'll sit there for 2 hours. I'll watch it. I won't enjoy it, but because I've seen everything, I don't have to listen to him tell me about it. So yeah,
I never
there
have
you
to
go.
talk to you about it ever again. Now go away. Leave me alone.
Any partners out there, any other halves, that is key. That is it. Take that away from this episode. That is a life lesson there. Take the hit for 2 hours, and it will save you weeks of just verbal acknowledgement. But yeah, I mean, obviously, I mentioned it before, Mr. Leto as Skeletor. I am. I like old school Leto. I liked him in like Lord of War. He has made some good films. I think he was a good actor. I think he kind of grew up into a bit of an arsehole from what I've heard. Hated him as Joker. He kind of redeemed himself in the Snyder cut of Justice League at the very end. But yeah, just his association with it was my only sort of concern. But the dude channeled it, and he kind of made the 80s Skeletor his own. It had the cackle, it had the laughs, it kind of had the, like, that bit when he does it and he's like, when I raise my fists up, that means I'm finished. He's like, oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. But yeah, no, smashed it for me. Huge, left a great impression.
Did you notice at one point he might have called Beastman a stupid boob or
Yeah,
nincompoop?
yeah.
He had the insults and everything. Um,
It was a boob. He'll call him a boob, I think. Yeah.
yeah, I thought it was good to see the cameo from. I don't want to spoil, but it was great to see the cameo. I know some people were hoping that he would be more of a King Grayskull character, but it was nice to see that actor appear in that scene,
Yeah.
and to even do the good journey reference from the original movie, another Easter egg.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say enough great things about this movie, and I'm trying to get my daughter to come with me. I think we're going to go again the weekend, and she's big on the He-Man memes. She knows all about the Four Non Bronze, what's going on version. I've been trying to. I mean, kids these days they know who Skeletor is because of because he was in Money Supermarket adverts like five,
Yeah.
10 years ago, doing all the crazy dancing. So he's one of those iconic characters that's always been there as part of pop culture. And there's lots of different versions of him. So it's just great to see another version. And the special effects on him were fantastic. I love the fact they had the little red dot for like the iris.
Yeah.
So you always knew where he was looking and you could kind of get a bit more of his emotion. Yeah, I thought the special effects for that skull were first class. Absolutely, yeah.
Chef's kiss. But yeah, that was it as well. It was just who smashed it. Shout out to Evelyn as well. I love that kind of the relationship between Skeletor and Evelyn. It kind of added a little bit more depth to it. You kind of saw that kind of again, kind of like just because I'm used to the Leto connection. It was borderline Joker, Harlequin,
Yeah.
abusive kind of like dominant kind of thing. But Evelyn was cool. She was a great character. And again, if they make the sequel, please, God, they can expand on it. I mean, it gives them, they've just planted enough seeds in that first one where they can, they've got the origin out of the way now. If they do a sequel and they do it right, man, it's going to be 120 minutes of just Eternia utopia.
Yeah. There's so many other characters that they can bring in, so many of the toys that you could bring in. Yeah, the one thing I do want to mention is one thing that really stood out to me in the '87 He-Man. There's one scene when Skeletor goes. I always call it like the IT scene. It's the scene where Skeletor goes and starts talking to like the IT guys that work behind the scenes when they're trying to track the cosmic key. And you've got the massive screen with Google Street View or Google Maps that zooms in on Earth. Anytime there is a movie and you've got this evil villain with his own bad guy organization, empire, whatever you want to call it, I'm always fascinated by all the guys that work there. So if you've got like an IT department, those are the guys who are trying to trace this thing across space and time. So I love seeing scenes like that, which then starts getting me thinking about like IT departments on the Death Star, which I ended up writing a comic book about that years ago, which I always wanted to get drawn but never got around to it. But then I'm always obsessed with the different roles and responsibilities of the different henchmen. And there's a point in the '87 movie when Evil Lynn is she's interrogating Courtney Cox's boyfriend, and they put like the neck collar on him to get him to talk. But the funny thing about that scene is Evil Lynn crouches down next to him and just kind of says, "I need the collar." And some guy hands the collar straight to her. So he's been there all the time holding onto this collar. They put the collar around him. Then Kevin can't lie to them, so he's telling the truth. But then the next thing she says is, "Have you seen this?" And someone else hands her the holographic projector, which is like this handle with a disc. So some other guy is just basically standing behind Evil Lynn with loads of gadgets that she might need at any point, being ready to hand them to her at a moment's notice. I want to know more about that guy. I want to know
Yeah,
what his
yeah.
job is like day to day. Because that's the sort of stuff in movies I want to know more about.
It's poor Bob. He goes home to his wife and kids. Like, oh, I had to help interrogate some poor schmuck today. I was just stood there, just
Yeah,
passing her
poor
stuff,
kid
you know.
beat up
Just,
today, and
yeah,
yeah,
dude.
I'd love more of that.
Again, I don't. Obviously, I've got this niche film interest. I'm going to sidebar quickly because this just reminds me of a conversation from a film called Clerks.
I've heard of that conversation many times.
But it's all about the people working on the Death Star. Like, it was fine when the first Death Star blew up because it was just full of stormtroopers, full of baddies. That's fine. But yeah, when they're building the second Death Star, they're like,
Yeah,
there would have been like plumbers and builders and people
all those
on that Death Star.
independent contractors.
There we go. That is one of my favorite conversations in any film ever. It's just totally, right up your street. It's exactly what you're on about. It's like, what about the posh books in the background? You know, the people that we don't know about, the unsung heroes. You know, those guys.
There is a comic that you need to read called Tag and Bink Are Dead. It's a Star Wars comic, but it's about two stormtroopers. It's about two rebel soldiers, always in the background throughout the entire original trilogy. And so there's all these different things. They're threaded through all the different movies. Tag and Bink Are Dead. You can get it as a graphic novel.
Right.
I guarantee if you read it, you'll be crying with laughter. It is so funny.
They're not one of the ones who banged their head in the first film, are they? They didn't make those.
It was a reference to heads being banged. It's not that they're the two guys that when Obi-Wan Kenobi's doing the tractor beam, they're the guys off in the background having a chat. But they start off as rebel troopers at the start, and they kind of steal some costumes and escape. And they're in the TIE fighter that's heading towards the Death Star. And the Falcon arrives. There's loads of little things like that.
Dude, right, yeah, right. I'll get on that later. I'll get that looked up and found and read. Yeah, again, it's right up my street. Just silly little things like that. I think it's just, again, it just adds to like bits and bobs. It just builds on the universe, you know, it expands on stuff. It just makes it, yeah. It just, but dude, just you know, in closing, the 80s film is, you know, if you watch it now, yeah, it's probably going to go over a lot of people's heads. If you were there back in the day, if you watched it, you didn't even have to be there back in the day. If you watch this for the first time at a young enough age,
yeah,
and it leaves that action fantasy impression, it plants those seeds, and you enjoy it for what it is at a young age, you'll remember it fondly for the rest of your life, and you'll be able to watch it over and over again and think it's awesome. Because so I've got my daughter, she went to watch Master Universe. My daughter loved it, my son loved it. They're sort of slightly older, they're 21 and 24, so they're old enough to kind of be like, okay, this is cool. But I showed her the trailer for the 80s one, and my daughter was like, nah, looks awful, I ain't watching that. I was like, damn, I missed the window. I should have made her watch it when she was younger, and then she would have appreciated it.
yeah. I suppose you've got to watch them in the right order. Watch the old one first, and then watch the new one. I remember. I mean, do you remember the Kevin Smith Netflix show that was out a few years ago too?
I was thinking about, because I've just talked about Clerks. I nearly sidebarred.
We kind of missed that obvious connection. I mean, you mentioned Courtney Cox in the Scream episode you did a couple of months ago. Then you had the Van Damme episode where the He-Man 2 that was going to happen got shelved, and they reused a lot of the props to make Cyborg, the Van Damme movie.
I didn't know that. I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, I was looking at your other episodes and finding the other links. There was a point where Dolph Lundgren did an action movie with Brandon Lee, which links to the Crow episode that you talked about a few weeks ago.
Showdown in Little Tokyo, just to shout it out. Great film.
Yeah. And I've not found any He-Man links to found footage movies just yet. In fact, no. In terms of found footage or shaky camcorder footage, did you know how the Rodney King beating, where the LAPD beat up the guy back in 1991, do you know how that is connected to the He-Man 1987 movie?
No, please tell me.
The scene where they have the chicken shack at the beginning, where Courtney Cox is working, that was the car park where the LAPD stopped Rodney King and then beat him up on camera when someone was filming from their house, which then led to those LA riots back in 1981.
No.
So found footage in He-Man ended up leading to riots across Los Angeles.
Wow, damn, dude. That is, I like that. I like the connection. I like that kind of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon shenanigans. But yeah, it's just, dude, I'm kind of I'm all hyped up. Now it's like when we talk about wrestling shows that I've been to and stuff like, it's always like when you start talking about it again, you get that hype, you get that energy. But yeah, I'm just, the fact it's an Amazon, it's got to be on Amazon soon. You know, as soon as it's at the start, it said Amazon film. I was like, nice. It means it's going to be included with Prime in hopefully a month,
Yeah.
2 months maximum.
Did
They'll take
you-
that.
Did you notice the Amazon Easter egg in the movie?
The van.
Crashing through Beastman. It was like brilliant product placement.
yeah. It's their film. They can do what they want. That's fine. Yeah, we'll have an Amazon fan. Bosh.
Yeah.
Right. The closing note, the closing thing, I just want to close this episode with a little bit of respect. I'm going to disrespect him because I'm going to totally forget his name, I think. But I want to shout out Paul Stinko, who just got dusted. You know, he's on screen for like 60 seconds and then killed.
Oh,
Seaweed Man. Moss Man.
Yeah.
Poor Moss Man. I had that toy. I loved that toy. It was stinky. It was great. As a kid, I could put it in people's faces and they'd be like, ah! I'm like,
it was covered in like green fluff, wasn't it?
Yep.
And it was just it was Beastman painted green with fluff, because they were always reusing the same parts and just repainting them. Which, for anyone who knows me in my other world of repainted toys, the kind of my toy customizing thing, it all goes back to those He-Man figures where they reuse the same parts again and again. And I now do that now as a grown adult, repainting old Star Wars figures to make new things. So yeah, very formative on my career as a customizer these days.
Dude, that's amazing. But yeah, shout out to Mossman. I was good to see him go, but you know, he showed up. He got his 60 seconds in the limelight, and he will forever be remembered. And if I had thought about it, I might have done a little memorial thing for Mossman just to pop up.
To Mossman.
To Mossman. We'll pour one out for him later. Dude, it's been an absolute genuine pleasure. Thank you so much. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
I thoroughly enjoyed this as well.
Yeah, we'll have to do something else.
I've got a big
list. I do want to. You got what?
Got a big list of other topics at some point we could discuss.
Yes. Hopefully the Turtles is on there. I did do a Turtles graphic the other day, and I put it out. I was like, I'll save this for later, but I'll put it on there as coming soon at some point.
To be honest, I think anything I do want to talk about, it's got to have an 80s or 90s movie. It's got to be a toy, and it's got to be something that's then been reinvented several times over the decades. So, yeah, Ninja Turtles, Street Fighter. Because the 90s Street Fighter movie has got an amazing behind-the-scenes origin of how it ended up being the way it was. And then we've got a remake this year, and we've had animated shows and low-budget movies over the years.
Chun-Li the movie, or whatever it was, yeah. That 96 that 96 manga Street Fighter is still one of my favorite films ever.
Yeah, it's awesome, that one.
Dude, right, okay, well, we'll pencil it in. As of when the new Street Fighter film comes out, we'll sounds like a plan. October, there we go. Awesome. I'll give you a bit of a chance to do your research and get ready for it. But yeah, well, I'll see you again in October then. But dude, let people know where they can find you on the socials. If they do want to obviously hit you up, see what shows, what PCW, other stuff, toy customization, all the good stuff. Let them know where they can find you.
Now, these days I am on Instagram as Pearce wrestling ring announcer. No, am I wrestling ring announcer? Pearce wrestling interviewer and announcer. I'm also on there as Repainted Toys, or you can find me under the same things on Facebook. I'm I'm exclusively PCW these days. I don't really have time to be doing shows anywhere else, so I'll just do PCW shows because they're not too far away. and I know all the boys and girls on the show, and I absolutely love it. We've got a Rumble this Saturday, which is probably before this is going to go out. So I'm talking about an event that's already happened by the time you hear this.
No, dude. If it's this will be uploaded tomorrow. So if it's coming this weekend,
so yeah, there is still time for you to buy your tickets for the Rumble in Blackpool on Saturday. And many years ago, there was a character called the WrestleManiac. I've not seen him for about 9 years. He appeared once. Some people think he looked a bit like me. I don't think he looked anything like me. Some people think he is going to be at the Rumble on Saturday. This is news to me because I'm meant to be ring announcing, so hopefully I'll get to meet the guy if he's there.
Nice. What if it's like one of those situations where you can't sort of be in the same space at the same time, or it'll shatter the universe, or like time will bend in on itself?
I've never met the guy, but I've heard I've heard he's a terrible wrestler. I've heard he's got a terrible clothesline. He can't run the ropes. He can't take a bump. He's got a terrible wig. But he's very lively and he runs around the ring quite a lot.
He's entertaining, and
God bless he is there to entertain.
He tries, and we've got to love a trier. So there we go. Obviously, when we upload this episode and I do the post on Instagram, we will tag you in it. So if you're not following Graham on either of the accounts that he's just mentioned, please hit that follow button. I will say thank you for watching. Hit like, subscribe, share, comment, all the generic stuff we ask you to do. Keep your eyes peeled. Lots of awesome stuff coming up. More guests to be announced soon. More at the movie episodes to be announced. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed two grown men reminiscing about a man with a furry loin from the 80s, and you'll come back and watch more stuff. But Mr. Pearce, it has been a genuine pleasure, mate. Thank you so much. Hopefully you've enjoyed.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's my pleasure, sir. And thank you for watching. And yeah, remember, I was going to say work the left side. I do this all the time. I can't say this on the movies ones. So we've got the new generic ending. Remember, always sit on the left side of the cinema. It's got better acoustics. And we'll see you again very soon. Goodbye.